I mean, the crypto space, I think, has been interesting just in how it's managed to pioneer a lot of that, right? Like, as, like I've mentioned, a lot of algorithms get developed by just, like people in Telegram chats between 3 different companies and 5 different countries. The way in which the crypto community also operates in this very geographically decentralized way, right? Like, if you had to ask someone, like, like, what is the capital of AI, right? Like, which city? Like, like, there is a clear answer, right? San Francisco. But if you had to ask that same question for crypto, like, there just is no answer, right? There's like a collection of maybe 5 or 10 different cities that have, a bunch of crypto activity, but otherwise, like, it just happens everywhere, right? Like,
hi, welcome back to Innovative Minds. I'm your host, T+. In the first part of this conversation, we talked about opportunities for skilled workers in Taiwan, as well as recent projects by Audrey and Vitalik. And now, we're going to delve into the most recent developments in the global tech sector. My first question is for Audrey. Can you explain to our audience what the Zero Knowledge Protocol is and its importance for privacy?
Yeah, zero knowledge means that we can prove something about myself, but without giving you new knowledge beyond this proof. For example, for many people who want to buy liquor in a store, they have to prove that they're 18 years old. But most of the ways to prove that I'm 18 years old also tells you how old I am. So zero knowledge means that it proves just that I'm a consenting adult and nothing else. You don't get to learn much more about me. Actually, if I present you my ID card, you not only learn my age, but also a lot other things about me as well. So during the pandemic, we have seen some applications of this kind of zero knowledge at work. The 2 most prominent contact tracing mechanism that Taiwan uses, 1922 SMS and the exposure notification mechanism, are both designed so that people aside from the contact tracers absolutely needing to notify you that you're probably exposed to community spread, nobody else in the middle, including the venue owner or anyone else, get to learn anything about who you are, where you have been. Although it is not using zero knowledge proofs, it's designed with this idea of zero knowledge in mind. It's a broader class of what we call privacy-enhancing technologies. So in the future, we have been translating zero knowledge proof, including range proof, applications like EV from Netherlands, so that the next time we need to present something that is requiring a physical credential or things like that, it can be done in such a way as I just described. At the moment, we don't yet use EV in most our city or municipal or governmental dealings, but there are already existing civic tech community that are interested in EV, and so we're sponsoring what we call proof of concept fields, so that if they want to try it out in one neighborhood, in one city, in one block, and so on, they're free to do so with our blessing and also with our code.
yeah, no, I think that's great. I think one other thing that is probably should not be too hard to do that would be cool as just, I mean, I don't know how much progress has been made already, but maybe you can tell me, is making the existing like Taiwanese ID system kind of more digital in the sense that like you could have an ID even contain a cryptographic key that you can use to sign things, right? Like the Estonian e-residency does this. The Mina card in Japan does something similar, right?
Yes.
Where like you have a key, you can actually sign things, and that lets you use it to like log into stuff. But like you can also like basically like as a third party developer just like go and use that in your own application and even like put your own zero knowledge wrappers around it. So I don't know, how far away do you think we are from Taiwan doing something like that?
Yeah, it's available today.
Okay.
With your gold card,
Okay.
you can apply to what we call a alien citizens digital certificate,
Right,
and
okay.
which is of course, private key and so on. And then you can also install an app called TW FIDO. Despite its name, it's not just for FIDO authentication. It is actually fully fledged with private key and public key for signing, encryption even, entirely working on your phone. And using your Alien CDC, the Citizen Digital Certificate card, you can just put that on the back of your phone using NFC. to activate that app. And from that point onwards, that app counts as your citizen digital certificate.
I see. So the alien CDC card, like it has a chip and it does signing on it already?
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's really
Right,
cool.
so you can bootstrap your
Exactly.
cryptographic identities, including key recovery or whatever, using both our card and also our app.
Yeah, no, it's, glad to hear. It sounds like good,
So
really
while
good progress.
you're here this week, maybe we should get your Alien CDC issued. And we tested actually our My Data platform, which allows you to use either the Alien CDC or the TW FIDO app to download any personal data that you store in the Taiwanese governmental agencies and things like that. And we just validated last week that it also works for Gold Card holders. So it should probably work. And if it doesn't, well, you can fix it, I know.
Perfect.
I'm glad to hear about these innovations. In a similar trend of thought, Vitalik, it feels like AI has stolen the spotlight from crypto in recent months. Can you give us your opinion on advances in artificial intelligence?
AI has made huge progress over the last few years. I think it's, basically impossible to deny that at this point, right? I think, like in the 2010s, it definitely felt like very few things in technology were really progressing. I mean, even though there was obviously a lot of important stuff quietly happening under the surface, but just in terms of like what was bubbling up to the top. And so, the crypto space definitely did benefit from a bit of a vacuum there, right? And, all you have to do is make a blockchain and it's already the biggest, like technological implementation of the decade. But then now, it's kind of feels like we're starting to get, like transhumanism in full gear, right? Started the decade with mRNA vaccines, which are literally, like taking a text file and then putting that into a specialized printer and, injecting it into your body to train your body to go after, like specific parts of virus particles. Like that's already pretty sci-fi stuff already, right? And then like next year we got like DALL-E and then GPT and then even better DALL-E and then even better GPT, and it feels real in a way that previous versions did not, right? Like like I personally use like ChatGPT like every day, and it's significantly improves my productivity in all kinds of ways. I mean, it's definitely very far from universal, and there's like lots of areas where it totally falls from its face, but it's like super helpful in enough areas that like I think it's improved my productivity on some tasks by like definitely 10 to 30%. I mean, I don't know, what's your experience?
Yeah, I've been coding much more after the code interpreter especially. And also I've installed Llama 2 locally on my own MacBook, and which with 96 gigs of RAM, which also doubles as VRAM, it runs things that performs better than the free version of ChatGPT entirely offline. And with this, I can fine tune with my own emails and all that.
No, that's amazing. Unfortunately, my computer is less kind of well powered with the specs. I actually I downloaded the Llama 7B model, and then there's a person I talked to who actually made their own implementation of Llama with NumPy, and managed to like actually get the whole thing running, which is like I think the sort of thing that you totally should do if you want to like actually understand how the stuff deeply works. But it took 2.5 minutes per token, unfortunately. But maybe I shall apparently go on the local Llama subreddit and maybe figure it out more. But no, it's just fascinating, right? How much progress there is on that. It also feels like self-driving cars are like finally here now, right? Like hearing. Unfortunately, San Francisco is the capital of AI, and we are hearing these news that there's the cars that are apparently starting to like properly drive around there, and you can hire them as taxis. So it's getting up there, and like these things. Obviously, especially as the technology keeps improving over the course of this next century, are going to just mean like really huge changes for humanity in all kinds of ways.
Definitely.
And in terms of like how all this connects to like sort of both crypto and things that I care about in general, right? Like it's on the one hand, AI is just like such a massive opportunity in terms of just empowering people and making it possible to do things, right? But on the other hand, it is a massive centralization risk in all kinds of pretty worrying ways, right? Like you can impersonate a million people. You can, replace a million people for a whole bunch of different tasks. On the riskier end of things, like if we have robot armies soon, then if you want to, be a dictator and go invade people, you don't even have to convince your own army anymore. You just like click a button, and if you had a grumpy evening, the invasion starts at 7:30 a.m. the next morning, right? So it's there's risks. It's worth like thinking about those risks too, right? And both, I think crypto, of course, is decentralization technology, and the way that I personally am seeing it is, I think the space has a responsibility to kind of continue to evolve and like make sure it's actually building things that make sense and like actually provide that like really important niche at a time when a lot like we really need ways for people to prove that they're people. We really need like just some technology that like gives the little guy like some way to kind of match the like the level of power that someone with a much larger amount of resources has. And obviously like there's just other kinds of digital technology can't just like solve all of the problems, and like AI has a lot of problems that'll have to be addressed in a lot of different ways, right? But like this definitely is something that I think basically every other tech field will have to adapt to somehow, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the main worry is that in order to counter this online impersonation, we will be forced to switch a real name internet. Basically, everybody have to digitally sign fully who they are in order to even start writing a post online, which of course destroys pseudonymity and things like that that kept the internet a equalizing power, right?
Yes.
So I think zero knowledge proofs in particular is very useful.
Exactly.
Yeah. In our ministry, we've switched entirely away from passwords. We all use TW FIDO now, or the CDC card. And then partnering with that is the zero trust stack that uses like Microsoft Authenticator or other compatible authenticators. So it's all very interoperable.
Right.
And then within that app, there is actually this tab say verifiable credential. So with each digital signing capability, we can convert these into zero knowledge proofs so that people can prove, for example, that they're a gold card holder without revealing who they are, or they are a resident of Taiwan without revealing where they're from. This is going to be super important in the future when, as you mentioned, the cost of impersonating each other is literally zero.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely glad that this stuff is all happening. It's finding ways for us to like prove that we're humans, finding ways for us to like go beyond that and also prove that we're like part of particular communities. These are like all things that the ASIC that is the human mind evolved over hundreds of thousands of years can do automatically a lot of the time by just like picking up cues in very natural contexts. But we're entering a very unnatural world, and a world where there's just a lot more people than the Dunbar's number that we've been used to dealing with historically, and just all kinds of complexities. And so having formal mechanisms that try to do some of those things is definitely going to be very important.
And some of the people are going to be synthetic.
Indeed, yes. We will absolutely get to that point, and we'll have to deal with that too.
Vitalik, you just mentioned that the cryptocurrency space has recently undergone a transition period, and you believe that it has been beneficial for the ecosystem. Could you explain your reasoning behind this, and share your thoughts on the future of the crypto space in the upcoming months?
Yeah, well, so the interesting thing that's happened in crypto over the last few years is that we have had this kind of first bear market, but then a year and a half long flatline market. And I mean, bull markets are like, in some ways, the blessing and the great curse of the crypto space, right? I mean, they're a blessing because they do end up funding everything that comes after. And, there's a lot of research that like this stuff is not just a crypto thing, right? That like even tech bubbles end up being like bad for the investors, but they basically, force the rich people to accidentally fund public goods basically. And so they end up being a net good thing. But at the same time, during these crypto bubbles, especially, we see a lot of stuff gets developed that starts kind of getting further and further away from like any notion of sustainability, right? Like I think we saw some of this happening in the GameFi space, for example, right? Like there's a lot of people trying to make blockchain games, and they kind of ended up forgetting that games are supposed to be fun, and they made things that were only enjoyable for people to participate in while they were in a general
It feels
environment.
like work, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it feels like fun if you're in an environment where everything is going up by 10% every month anyway, right?
Of course.
But then once stuff stops going up by 10% every month, then like that entire model breaks, and like people just leave after like a few months, right? And then obviously we saw stable coins that had economic models that like literally depended on 19% growth every month, and once that stopped happening, then they ended up being kind of pretty screwed. We just saw all kinds of pretty crazy things, and I think for those kinds of reasons, like if you talk to people on the tech side of crypto, like they often end up dreading the bulls and being grateful for the bears. Because what a bull means to the user is like, hey, my coin prices are going up, but what a bull means to the developer is like, oh my god, the number of users is going to go up by a factor of 5, and we still haven't figured out scalability, right? And so we got this period where now, on the flip side, actually, I feel like prices of most of the crypto assets have been like pretty stable for about 1.5 years now, and so you have neither the craziness of the bull nor the kind of despair of the bear, and there's just a lot of steady ongoing progress on technology, like zero knowledge proofs. Back in 2020, they were, in theory, they were obviously a thing, and we knew how they work, but like in practice, you had to be an expert in like write your own zero knowledge proving code just to make a privacy preserving application. But now we just have all kinds of standardized tools to do that sort of thing. Ethereum obviously has finished the merge, so moved away from proof of work that caused us to consume as much electricity as I think the country of Austria, to proof of stake that has us consuming basically nothing, right? So I think it's something that a lot of Ethereum people are really proud of, and at the same time though, it's like the battle against the environment monster has been won, but the battle against, or the battle of being actually affordable to do things on chain has begun, right? And so everyone is, full speed ahead on scalability, because only by increasing the amount of activity that can happen on chain can you actually reduce the transaction fees that people have to pay to do on chain operations, and. That's, but the good news is that there's just a lot of progress, right? These ZK EVMs, these are zero knowledge proofs that are proving over Ethereum execution, right? So it just so happens, right, that with what are called ZK snarks, which is basically what people use when they talk about zero knowledge proofs, like, the math gods managed to bless us with this 2-in-1 amazing win, right? Where this technology gives us privacy, but it also gives us scalability, right? If you make a proof, even if that proof is a proof of an incredibly complicated computation, you can, once you make the proof, verifying that proof is incredibly cheap. And like this just unlocks a whole bunch of scalability, like some magic solutions in all kinds of decentralized systems, right? Like, if you can't do the computation yourself, let someone else go do it, and then they make the proof, and then you just verify the proof, right? And this could let people, verify the chain on a phone and just all kinds of things, right? So a lot of beautiful technical progress that's happening that I think is just necessary to enable the space to like actually grow in a way that's kind of healthy and like actually implements the values that the space has been trying to be about from day one. So a lot of good things there, and continuing to get more and more kind of like just interesting waves of applications, right? I guess the other big thing about 2022, I mean, it's in definitely a year that will forever live in infamy for like all kinds of different reasons. But one of the lesser reasons among them is just the whole insanity that happened with Twitter. Like started then, and a lot of that ended up. Being the a kickstarting interest in making like these alternative like social media platforms, and like some of these are things that have already existed for a long time, like Mastodon, right? And
it's
like,
just not synced in, right?
Exactly. And like God, it's just a lot of these things got this kind of like like second wave of interest, and then also some new things like there's Farcaster, which is an Ethereum based Twitter alternative. Again, link an Ethereum account. I believe in the future we'll be able to sign in with an Ethereum account, right? So, you can have a secure Ethereum wallet like actually being an identity root instead of just like some password that you can easily like just completely forget. Like I've been on Farcaster, and it's actually pleasant to use, and like there's an actually nice community there, right? So like I personally am hopeful about just like the many different kinds of small progress that have been happening.
Yeah, I've been saying that I will only actually create a Ethereum wallet and have Audrey Tang after the successful merge, right? That was our previous discussion, and I'm happy that the merge actually happened. And I've been signing in the Zuzalu online discourse instance with ease, and I'm very interested in how much user experience work have been putting to this kind of community, not just coordination and organization, but just to improve the newcomers' feeling about it, right? So when we issue SBTs, before I had an Ethereum account, I used the Tezos public blockchain with Kukai, which converts my Google digital signature into this pair of Tezos signatures, and it feels just like logging into any other Web2 website, which improves the user experience much more than any other sign-in flow. And I'm now very interested to discover that even for Ethereum and for the newer, I haven't tried Farcaster, but a lot of attention has been putting into this nitty-gritty details of letting the first-time journey better.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is one of the like really big value propositions that like something like Zuzalu can provide, right? And that it's like it is a community where you can build applications that grow with the community, right? Like ZooPass itself, like was basically created by and for Zuzalu, and big parts of the team lived in Zuzalu, and it got a lot of feedback, and not all of the feedback was positive, and the thing adapted and the thing improved. Like I remember at the beginning, the thing was very clunky to use because when I opened the app, which was, I mean, it's really a website. I guess it's what the cool kids call a progressive web app because you need to make websites sound cool. But it took like 15 seconds to regenerate the proof. And so if you want to like use it to sign in person to something, like I had to remember, okay, now I'm starting to walk on the bridge, which goes to the dome, where the dome is this location in Zuzalu where the events were happening. And when I start walking along the bridge, I have to open ZooPass to make sure that when I actually get to it, I'll actually be able to, like show the QR code to the person, right? I complained, and a month later, this basically got solved, right? So I guess see if I realized that I have become a bit rusty on my web development because I like learned about this concept of service workers, right? Like this is the reason why when you like log into Twitter, like if you go to twitter.com when you're offline, like it doesn't just immediately break. It like actually shows you a page and then the page breaks, right?
That's right.
And like there's like code that sort of stays there and keeps running
in the background.
Exactly, it keeps running in the background even when you don't have internet access. And so I believe they used that, and then they also managed to like really speed up the signing technology itself. And then like by the end of it was just like a much better experience.
Yeah, I had to convince my staff to switch away from passwords. And one of the tricks we use is just to measure how quickly you sign in through FIDO and how quickly you do via typing those passwords.
Right.
And it's not until that this is significantly shorter time do people actually agree that we should switch to passwordless. I mean, rationally, we all understand that this is more secure, but people want to feel that it's also easier to use in order to change their habits.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, getting the usability to be like at that level is definitely really important. And it's interesting to see. I think zero knowledge proofs are like finally at the cusp of being there, right? Remember at the beginning they were not. Like at the beginning, the very first version of Zcash, which was Zk Snark based, fully privacy preserving cryptocurrency, the very first significant application that used zero knowledge proofs, making a proof took 90 seconds on a laptop, I believe. On a phone it was not even possible, right? And then they brought it down and it's like 60 and then 20 and then 3 and then these days it's 3 on a phone, right? So it's improving quickly, right? And it's amazing to see that kind of improvements, but then it's like every step of improvement also ends up unlocking a completely new class of activity that the thing actually makes sense for, right? It's like there's just so many ways in which like increments in capability or increments in scale like really just do feel like completely new categories of things to become possible.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about open source is that people who mostly feel the pain of not being able to run this locally are also the people with the skill to make it run locally.
Right.
I remember last year, around a year ago, I talked with HT Kong, someone who invented the systolic array and much of modern AI processing. At the time, like he's been talking about trillion parameter models like ChatGPT and so on. And I made a kind of bet saying that within a year, I trust the open source community would not just replicate its quality, but also make the inference run on a phone. And the kind of 7 billion model you just mentioned is now actually running on phones. But just 1 year ago, it didn't seem possible. It seemed that you will have to have an entire array of the latest and greatest NVIDIA chips to do even a little bit of fine-tuning. But because the people who feel the pain are also open source contributors and they coordinate very well, nowadays we have this entire community just specializing quantizing models and tuning those quantized models.
No, absolutely. The open source communities can be extremely powerful if you just give them a chance.
It's great to hear that the open source community is able to match the performance of the biggest AI labs so quickly. Are there any other Web3 developments you'd like to talk about?
Developments in Web3, it's like such a big category, right? Especially, I think, because the space is sort of, it reinvents itself every 3 or 4 years in all kinds of ways, right? Like back at the beginning, it was the Bitcoin space, and then sometime around 2013 to 14, you had the Great Divergence, and Ethereum came out, but then Bitcoin split between the small block and big block side at around the same time, and then. We also had the whole business blockchain movement start about a year later. Then, 2019, I guess. Uniswap actually came out in October 2018. I was there in Prague when it launched. I was one of the first people to transact on it. I think I made like $8 by arbitraging manually, and that was only 4 years ago. But from there, we had the DeFi summer, and then at the same time, NFTs were happening. And Now, like it feels like, I mean, even then, right, the space sort of diverged in a bunch of ways, right? Because like I talk about, all of these like DeFi and NFT and like all these things, and like sometimes people tell the story as though the narrative changes, but like no, the narrative expands, right? And like when Thing N gets introduced, Thing N minus one is still there. And there's hundreds of people that are still full-time working on Thing N minus one, and they're still doing their thing, right? I mean, even Bitcoin, the store of value and the payment system, like there's people who really care about making like both of those happen, right? So now, there's just all of these different parts of the crypto space that have these like very different philosophies and very different spirits, and obviously like some of those philosophies and spirits more than others, but this is, I guess, a kind of maturity, right? It's like when the thing gets big enough that it also includes things that you don't vibe with. If it's not that, then like if a space has not gotten to that, then it's just not big yet. It's still tiny. It's still your little bubble. So there's in terms of interesting things that are happening, a lot of it is just stuff that has existed for a long time, but just making it easier to use. So one of the big themes of this year is account abstraction. Account abstraction is a technology that makes it easier to use smart contract wallets. So a smart contract wallet is a wallet that, instead of being controlled by a single key, is controlled by a computer program. Now, why would you want to do this? Because you want to specify custom conditions for how to authorize, like, when someone's allowed to send a transaction, right? And these conditions could mean different cryptographic algorithms. It couldn't mean having multiple keys. It could mean having quantum proof algorithms. It could mean having the ability to change what your keys are, like all kinds of things, right? And those are all valuable in a bunch of different ways, right? So, for storing any serious funds, right? It's like at this point, it's, I think, basically accepted that you just have to use a multi-sig wallet, right? A multi-sig wallet is a wallet that has multiple keys that are ideally held by like different people or institutions, where you need multiple of these keys. So, like, for example, like Ethereum Foundation funds are stored in a 4 of 7. And then my own funds are stored in a 4 of 6. I know it's theoretically bad advice to reveal security setups, but like the reality is that this is on the public blockchain already, right?
Okay.
But it's
the enemy already knows the system.
Exactly. But but basically, so, and what this means is that, you have, like, like in the Ethereum Foundation wallet case, 7 different keys owned by 7 different people, and you need 4 of them to like actually approve a transaction, right? And multi-sig wallets done properly have, like, I think pretty much never really been hacked, right? The only cases I know of like something happening to a multi-sig are, well, there was like very high stakes cases involving things like bridges that handle like like hundreds of $1 million of people's funds, where on top of that the people were technically incompetent and like put like a bunch of keys on the same VPS or something, right? But for like normal use, like, this is already great security, but it's crappy usability, right? And one of the reasons why it's crappy usability is because smart contracts cannot pay transaction fees in Ethereum, right? It's this rule that has existed all the way since 2015, right? And the way that this works is that you have to have this type of account called an EOA, an externally owned wallet, which is an account controlled by one private key. And so if you want to use a multi-sig wallet, you have to have this separate wallet that controls a small amount of ETH to pay transaction fees, and then that starts the transaction, and then it passes the signatures along to this other account, and then that actually launches things. And so there's just like extra annoyance, extra complexity, just like extra like blah. And account abstraction basically fixes a lot of those issues. So account abstraction, one of the things that we did was actually at the very beginning, the initial goal had been to make it an EIP. EIP stands for Ethereum Improvement Proposal, so a proposal to change the Ethereum protocol. But then the problem is that the Ethereum developers are busy on 10 other things, including the merge. And so instead, we made it an ERC, which stands for Ethereum Request for Comments, which like does it's not really a great acronym, but like it just means it's a standard and you can follow it if you want. And it's like a way to accomplish the same thing without changing the Ethereum protocol, instead of relying on standards that live on the second layer. And so it's this, like much more open source community friendly approach to bootstrapping the whole concept. And what we saw was we saw just dozens of account abstraction wallet companies appearing everywhere. There's actually even one in Taiwan. It's called Blockto. I visited their offices a couple of days ago. They're actually not too far from here. They're I think maybe 500 meters southwest of Songshan Airport.
Oh yeah, you measure by walking distance.
Right. Yeah, no. Songshan Airport is great. It's it's good to have an airport you can easily walk to. Yeah, but it's there's just a bunch of these wallet companies everywhere, and it feels like both the zero knowledge space and ZK EVM space and the account abstraction space have done a good job of sort of resetting the clock, in the sense that people who just come into the space and who have no background on the history, they can just come and participate in the new thing, and they can be up there with everyone else, right? And that's really amazing and beautiful. And it's there's a huge Chinese speaking 4337 community that at the beginning I did not even know about. And yeah, it's just growing quickly, and the result of this is that it looks like we're going to have wallets that are actually both decentralized, in the sense that you don't have one company where if that company gets hacked, everyone's coins are gone, and secure for regular people, way for people to hold cryptocurrency, right? So whenever we see these kinds of solutions to real problems, that always makes me happy. The other really nice one is EIP1559, which is a complicated reform to the economics of sending transactions in Ethereum that's probably a little gets very wonky to properly explain here, but the result of it was basically that it reduced the amount of time that an actual transaction in for a real user takes to get included on chain, from something often 5 to 10 minutes down to basically 10 seconds. That's right. And it's a night and day difference to people's ability to actually use Ethereum in real life, right? And these things are important, right? The story that I often tell here is I remember visiting Argentina 2 years ago, and Argentina has a huge crypto enthusiast population, right? And as I mentioned, Argentina is a country with a low state capacity but a high people capacity, and the low state capacity does bite. They've been averaging 30% inflation for, I believe, basically the past century. And it's people have ended up being very inventive and resorting to US dollars, cryptocurrency, all kinds of things to save their money and do transactions and move money between Argentina and other countries. And the number of Ethereum users there is huge. I literally get recognized on the street more often in Buenos Aires than I do in San Francisco, right? So capital of AI, not the capital of crypto. But the thing that you notice, though, is that if you look a little bit more carefully, everyone in Argentina is using a Binance wallet. And Binance is, of course, a centralized exchange, right? And it's I think I always say I really appreciate the service that they provide, because they at least do provide something that does work for people and fills very real needs that people have at a time when the blockchain itself takes 7 minutes to confirm a transaction, and it costs a transaction fee of $4, right, which is just way too high for these people. And in Binance, it's free and instant. But at the same time, it is centralized, and we do want to try to decentralize people's experiences over time, or at least remove the need to have a centralized intermediary, if just to do basic things on the platform in a reasonable way. And that's on the latency side, like the problem is like basically solved, and like now on the scalability side, we have to get those fees down, and so now we have these layer 2 protocols that are finally like starting to reach maturity, and so that problem is being solved as well. But look, once that happens, then we'll have Ethereum, like a blockchain ecosystem where you can actually have a like secure and like cheap and easy experience, and it'll actually be competitive with the more centralized solutions. So like this is the sort of thing that like I'm trying to make happen, and I hope that as an ecosystem we can keep working together to make happen, and it feels like a lot of progress has been made, and a lot more will be made.
Yeah, the great thing about a growing open source community is that there are people literally swarming in different parts of the puzzle. There's somewhat centralized but very usable parts, and there's also very decentralized but somewhat unusable, and everything in between, right?
Yes.
So there's a clear path of migrating from here to here and from here to here, so that you get something that is both decentralized and usable, but without a swarming community. It's not in any different camps' interest to think about this bridging narrative or bridging maneuver. But with the people actually using it, like in Argentina, being part of the equation, they are super motivated to find not a compromise, but something that's the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now I want to move on and talk about how Taiwan is involving its citizens in the creation of public policy through the Ideathon. Audrey, could you tell us more about this initiative?
Sure. So as part of the Ideathon, we're asking people about ideas that they feel are important for not just the human society, but also for AI to understand in 2040, basically. So people write about things that they care about, that they believe that it's worth the AI also caring about in the year 2040. And anyone who submits an idea gets a soulbound token, of course. But in addition to that, they also can say that this idea is entirely human-generated, or if they have consulted with generative AI, or if this is entirely generative, and so on. So this is a place where people can easily experiment with how generative AIs change the way the public policy making and crowdsourcing works. So at the Ideathon, we will have 2 deliberative workshops. We call them alignment assemblies. Alignment means that we have these societal expectations of how AI should behave, and now we should fine-tune the AI to actually take care of those concerns. Assembly means that we actually gather in real world, face-to-face, to have a conversation. The agenda, of course, is set by Polis and by those crowdsourcing technologies like Talk to the City, which uses a language model to synthesize a opinion cluster, so you can have a conversation with that opinion cluster. Previously with Polis, it automatically visualizes where people are and how the bridge is made. But now you can also have a synthesized conversation with a bridge maker and say, I'm of this ideology, I'm firmly of this opinion. Can you show a conversation that will lead me into something that is more of a rough consensus? So it's like a community note drafter, right, in this regard. And so with this kind of technology, we believe that even with millions of people participating in the same time, we can cohere into something like a rough consensus of how this community with 1 million people, for example, expects the AI to work in their city, in their municipality, or in Zuzalu, in any community with this kind of real-time feedback. So when we meet face-to-face, we will then have this entire day of conversation. The transcript captured will feed into a large context of a language model. We'll tune that model, and the model, hopefully, will respond to what people expect of it. And then any community can also run it as open source after all, and tune it towards their community's liking or their enterprise settings liking or whatever. So it's a way to democratize the fine-tuning of AI by directly asking people, what are your ideas around generative AI?
That sounds fascinating. I mean, I definitely would look forward to seeing what the results of something like this are going to be like.
When we're having that conversation, you will be on an airplane to Palau.
Amazing.
I believe. Yeah.
We'll definitely keep an eye on the result of the Ideathon. To end this interview on a high note, do you have any questions for each other?
So, I remember 10 years ago you described yourself as a conservative anarchist,
Still do.
and still do. And you're also in the government and, running a really important ministry. So, I don't know. What is your philosophy of what government should be doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a conservative is someone who don't rush things. In Taiwan, we have 20 or more national languages, 16 indigenous nations with 42 variations of languages. And the centralizing force of AI that you just mentioned poses the threat of people having to just speak one or two mainstream languages in order to even have their ideas count. Because in the pre-training, these low-resource language were not included. And so if you ask ChatGPT, for example, to speak in one of those indigenous or other Taiwanese languages, it will probably synthesize something that look like it, but it's nothing like it, right? And so for people with these lower resource languages, what we're doing is essentially conserving their culture, conserving their community's ways of looking at things, finding ways so that they can also fine-tune translation, speech recognition, and things like that, and with the assurance that this will not pollute their culture because it will be community fine-tuned.
Right.
So this is conservative in a small c conservative sense, right? And anarchism basically means direct democracy. People who want to run alignment assembly by themselves are going to have this toolkit that they can run it without anyone's permission. And so instead of the flip side of anarchism is, of course, authoritarianism, where only the author of the polity gets to decide what to tune, what to allow, censorship, or things like that. Like decentralized open source, which is the same as anarchism anyway, approach basically says, let's share the blueprint and let the people who are closest to the pain innovate to address the pain. Right. So the Ministry of Digital Affairs, I guess, is one of the proving grounds for this kind of philosophy, so that we accept the fact that we don't come up with most of the innovations. But if we connect the people closest to the pain, then actually their co-creation can be scaled to a societal infrastructure.
Amazing.
Great.
Empowering people closest to the pain to find tailored solutions sounds revolutionary. I want to thank both of you for joining today. Together, we have discussed the most interesting developments in Web3 and beyond. And if you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share, and let us know what you think. See you next time on Innovative Minds.
Hello, I'm Vitalik Buterin, founder of the Ethereum project. See you on TaiwanPlus Docs.
Hello, I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. See you on TaiwanPlus.